world, it's Keely and I'm back for another video. I wanted to make a video where I'm answering a bunch of questions that you might have if you're deciding if you want to go back to school or not, or if you want to continue your education right after high school. Videos like this really would have helped me at the time when I was deciding what I was going to do with my life. All of it was like a very fast process. I finished high school, or I was finishing high school and was like, I have no plans to go to college. I don't want to do anything. I'll figure it out. And then I met my now husband and he was already in college and I wanted to spend time with him, and I was like, sure. So I ended up enrolling into community college and then transferring out to a 4-year university. And then from there it was like, well, of course you go to grad school. So I just didn't really think about it. I went to grad school, and I recognize at every step along the way, while there were definitely some hardships and I did struggle with various things, I was lucky enough to have the privilege to go to undergrad and grad school. And I just think answering these type of questions, like these are all questions that I've had at various times. And so I figured, why not use the knowledge that I have in, my experience of being someone that went through formal education and then also has taken a ton of online classes since that time, which was when I graduated in 2015. I have now taken many courses over the years, and I'm actually back in school right now through the community college. So I just wanted to talk to you guys, go through a bunch of questions. I have this broken up into 2 major sections. The first section, I'm going to go through some questions that are really focusing on deciding if college is right for you, deciding if going back to school when you're older is the right decision for you. So this can be for people that are just, kind of emerging into the field. You just graduated high school or you're about to, versus people that have been out of the formal school system for however long, and now you're deciding if you want to go back. The first thing I would say is really think about what is the ultimate goal of going to school, of going back to school, of going to school. What is your ultimate goal? If your ultimate goal is to be able to support yourself and your family, that is a totally valid goal, but that's not specific enough to really help you decide if formal school, like a 4-year program or a 2-year grad program or whatever, is going to work for you, because there are plenty of other ways to make money, including trade schools, technical schools, 2-year programs, things like that. So I would ask you to challenge yourself and try to really figure out what is it that will get you to the point of making money to survive. Like how can you get there? What things might you be able to do in order to get to that place? Following along with that is also asking, is this the right decision for me? I recognize that some people don't have a choice in their family dynamic. It's just what you do. It's a requirement from your parents that you go to school. I recognize that. Every person's situation is different. So I would just encourage you to really think about, what can I get out of this experience? Is this going to be something that I will be happy with in the long run? There's plenty of people that go to 4-year schools or enroll in programs and they end up dropping out for a wide variety of reasons, or they finish and they have a degree in something they don't care about. And every situation, every circumstance is, again, completely valid and completely fair. It's kind of a ridiculous thing that we ask kids when they're like 16 to 18 to decide on something as huge as what they want their career to be, especially with the fact that like a career for the entire span of your life doesn't really exist anymore. Many people will end up hopping to multiple different fields or multiple different jobs. And the fields that I've been in, the places that I've worked, it's like every 3 years we've got a new group of people coming in and people rotate out, and it's just, this idea of working for a company for 50 years and then getting a pension doesn't exist in the United States anymore. And so we have kind of an antiquated system in terms of requiring that kids come up with what they want to do with their life. So I would just have you talk to yourself and really think about, and ask the people you trust in your life, kind of, is this the right decision for me? Should I go back to school? Should I enroll in further education? Is it going to be more beneficial for me, or is it just a requirement for existing right now that I spend time working, or that, maybe you end up going into a trade program, or, if you want to be like a plumber or something like that, there are programs that you can do that will train you. They're like training programs that are not a 4-year degree. So a 4-year degree or, beyond that is not a perfect fit for everyone, and it's a huge decision to make. So just kind of thinking about, what do I want to get out of this? Is this the right fit for me? If you've gotten to the point where you're like, okay, I definitely want to go back to school, awesome. Then you have to think about, what field am I interested in? What is it that I want to do as a result of the thing that I'm studying? It's perfectly fine if you don't have a specific job in mind. If you're just like, I know I want to work with kids. Okay, cool. We can then, break it down more and be like, in what capacity do you want to work with kids? Do you not care and you just want to work with kids across the board? Awesome. You can potentially do that without going to school. So we have to think about, and I'm saying we because I'm including myself in this process, even though we don't know each other, but think about, is what I want to do something that requires further education, specified training, or is it something that I can learn on the job? Part of that, I would also say, if you're deciding to go back to school, is it because you need further education to get a promotion? Is it just something that makes sense? You've decided this is the field I want to do, and so I want to get certified in it. I want to do something really niche within my career, within, what I am doing. That is all perfectly fine, and plenty of people do that. So just trying to figure out, what is it that I want to do and what is my goal for going back to school? Is it, going back to those first questions, is this the best way for me to get to the end goal of, whatever you want out of your life? Okay, let's say that you've decided to go to school. You're definitely going to do it. You know what field. All right. Now, do you want to be niche or do you want something broad? My experience is that it makes more sense to do something broad and get specialized in a particular thing after schooling. However, that does not apply for a lot of medical fields and a lot of the hard sciences, so chemistry and stuff. So you could start out with, let's say you want to go pre-med. Okay, awesome. You might need a degree in biology or a degree in chemistry or something like that. And then as you get into those further education beyond your 4-year degree, then it gets more specified. That's, what my husband and his best friend did. They both have 4-year degrees in chemistry, and then they both went to grad school for the more specialized thing. In my case, I did the opposite. So I have a 4-year degree in psychology, and at the time, this was in 2012, 2013, I really wanted to be a forensic psychologist. I really, really, really wanted to be the person that does evaluations of those who are incarcerated to determine if they have the capacity to stand trial. That is what I wanted to do. However, I thought the best way to do that would be a forensic psychology degree. However, all these caveats, back when I was deciding on grad school or not, I spoke with the director of my undergraduate program, but he actually recommended that I don't go that specialized because at the time, forensic psychology was pretty new and there were a lot of programs popping up, but they were from for-profit colleges and universities, and it was a little bit wishy-washy on whether or not they were legitimate or not. And he recommended instead that why not you switch fields, go social work, and work your way back into that system. Now, I struggled with that. I could talk about that in a different video, but I was like, that makes sense. Sure, why not? So I searched for programs that had some kind of connection to criminal justice, and I ended up getting a social work degree. And guess what? I've worked in criminal justice for the last 12 years, not as a forensic psychologist in that initial role that I thought, but I still found my way back to the field. So that's what I mean by deciding if you want to go super niche or if you can get where you want to go broadly and then figure it out along the way, get specialized training along the way. The next question you have to ask yourself is this a part-time or full-time thing? Do I have everything I need in order for this to be a full-time commitment? And if you're younger, there's a good chance that you have more availability in your life to do that. There are definitely people that don't. There are some teenagers that do school and then have to work multiple jobs to support their family. And I, again, recognize that. I'm not trying to exclude anyone, but this is just something to think about, is do I have the time, the finances, the resources, everything to commit my entire day? Or is this something I can do potentially part-time, and part-time can look like a lot of different things. It depends on the program. Some part-time programs have a requirement that you have a certain number of credits per semester. Others are way more lenient, and they understand that people might be coming back to school later in life, or that you have other commitments. And so if you can commit to one class a semester, it's obviously going to take longer to get your degree, but for some programs that's doable. So I wouldn't say that you are completely out of options if you can only do one class at a time. Your options just might be limited. But again, it's up to you on what works for you. Once you have all that figured out, and now you're trying to figure out where you want to go to school, finances are a huge part of it, because higher education is not free in the United States. And it costs a lot. It really does. Even for community college, state school, private schools, all levels. School costs a lot, because it's not just tuition. You're also potentially paying for room and board. You're paying for textbooks. You're paying for resources. You're paying for access to the school's resources. You're paying with your time and your energy. It's an expensive process. As you're considering all of this and you're really figuring out what's going to work best for you, you want to consider your school options. Do you want to look at private schools? Do you want to look at state system schools? Do you want to look at state adjacent system schools? What do you want to do? State schools are schools in your state that fall within the state school system. I don't know the specifics of it. This is my experience from when I was in college. But state schools are basically going to be some of your cheapest options other than community college. State adjacent schools are those schools that seem kind of like a state school, but are technically a little bit more private, or get their resources from somewhere else. So an example would be, my undergrad does not exist anymore. The buildings still exist. But when I went to school out in Western Pennsylvania, I went to Clarion University of Pennsylvania. So a lot of the times you'll get those state schools that have the state in their title. And so my state school was Clarion University of Pennsylvania. It now, because the state school system has really been struggling over the years, got absorbed into a bigger conglomeration of state schools. So now it's a campus of a school system. So it's Penn West, I think. But anyway, it was a state school. When we went to grad school, my husband and I went to two expensive schools. I went to an Ivy League, University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, which was incredibly friggin' expensive. And my husband went to a state adjacent type school, Temple University, which is not technically a state school. It's a little bit more expensive. I don't know why. I don't really understand the intricacies of the funding systems for education, or why schools cost what they do. I have no idea. But you really want to consider, like, what education do I want? Is it something that I can get from a state school, or is it something that requires a very specialized program that only a private school or, you know, a specific university offers, and it's not something I can get from a state school? I'm going to make a really generalized statement here, with the caveat that this is not true in all circumstances. A lot of the degrees that are out there that you can get from a 4-year program, you can get a really good experience at a 4-year state school, and you don't need to go to an Ivy League or a private school or anything like that. You can get just as good an education if you're just getting like a basic degree in whatever. That gets more complicated when you're getting into further degrees like graduate schools, because a lot of times your employer is looking at where you went to school to get that extra degree. So especially if you're going to medical school, there are more intricacies and complexities of that process where they're like, where did you go to school? Are you sure that's real? Versus if you say, you know, I went to a huge teaching university in Philadelphia or somewhere in Florida or California or whatever. If you're just wanting a basic ass, which is totally fine, if you just want a basic degree, consider a state school, because it's gonna save you money. There are other things that would potentially limit your experience at a state school, and that could be the resources that the state school has, the connections that the state school has. But typically that stuff is going to really come into play when you're looking into graduate programs compared to undergraduate degrees. Again, it's more complicated than that. I'm not trying to offend anyone or say that anyone's process or experience is invalid. No, everything is valid. Everything is totally your experience, and that's fine. Just in general, state schools are perfectly fine. The next question is, all right, you've got the topic that you want to study. You've got the school that you want to study. Did you take standardized tests? A lot of programs require standardized tests in order for you to get into that program. There are standardized tests for undergraduate degrees and standardized tests for graduate programs. I got away with never taking standardized testing because, like I said, when I was finishing up high school, I had no plan on going to college. So why would I spend the money and the time and effort and the stress of taking the SATs if I had no plans to go to college? Well, what that meant was I couldn't immediately enroll in a four-year school because the majority of four-year schools require SAT scores. Now, a lot of schools have been changing over the years where that is not necessarily the case anymore. So you would have to look at your specific program and the requirements for admission, but know that that could potentially push off your enrollment in that program if you haven't yet taken the standardized tests that you're required to. Community college often has placement tests that they would like you to take. So for me, going back to school in my 30s after doing a graduate degree and then other schooling, I'm also not doing a program. I'm just taking individual courses. I did not have to take any placement exams now. But when I enrolled in community college right out of high school, I did. And those were very basic, like math tests, reading comprehension, essays, because they need to know what classes they can place you in and which areas you might need more support in. A lot of times, if you score really highly on something, you can opt out of that class and you can go to the next level of that class. So it can save you time and money. It can also potentially cost you time and money if you do need to take a more basic level of whatever type of class it is. One of the classes that they recommended that I take when I first started at community college was a very basic like composition writing course and grammar and all of that stuff because I was not used to writing full essays. I especially wasn't used to writing essays college level. So I had to take this course and it was so frustrating because I don't love grammar and all of that. Like I don't enjoy learning about all of that stuff. So that was frustrating, but when it came to math, I was able to opt out of some stuff, which then helped me in college because then I was able to take higher levels of math. Placement tests are for community college. Standardized tests are typically for four-year degrees. If you're going back for grad school, the big test, unless it's, again, I don't know a ton about like the medical field, but the major test that you might have to take for graduate programs is the GREs. There are a ton of sample questions, there's test booklets, all kinds of study programs, all of that available online. I will try to link some for SATs and for GREs down below. But again, know that specific programs are going to have specific requirements and things that you have to meet in order to enroll in those programs. So that's just another part of the process, is figuring out what enrollment requirements they have. And the final question for this section is it enrollment time? Is it time for you to start pulling together all of the pieces for your admissions package? If you're going to community college, the process is a lot simpler than it is for a state school. And if you're going to a state school for a four-year degree, the process is a lot simpler than it is for grad school. Each school has its own requirements. Each program within that school has its own requirements. So that's something that you want to start looking at. All of those schools and programs also post calendars of the deadlines for when you need to submit certain things and then when you can start registering for classes and all of that stuff. They also will typically post for graduate schools if they're not accepting anyone into that program for the next year's cohort or something like that. If you're looking for a program and you're like, okay, cool, enrollment is in fall, I don't need to have my application in until July. Awesome. Now you have time to prepare and get yourself ready. And if by July it's still something you want to do, you can start working on your application. You also, if you decide that you want to go to school right now, you might end up having to go start like the next semester or 2 semesters from now or next year. It depends on the requirements and what time of year you decide that you want to do schooling. Now we're going to get into the second section of this video. So the first section is all about deciding whether or not you are ready to go to school, if school is something that's going to be a good fit for you, all of that stuff. Coming into the second section, this is assuming you've already made those decisions and now you're actually going to start. So here's some of my tips for you. The first tip is really think about, what kind of student am I and how do I learn best? If you're an adult, there's a lot of adult learning theory out there and the different ways in which people learn. This is something that I ask anytime I help with onboarding or training a new employee, is how do you learn? Because that's going to inform how I try to teach you. If you are someone that learns by doing, I can give you every booklet in the world and it's not going to make a damn difference until you're actually doing the thing. Are you someone that benefits from hearing things? Can you listen to recordings? Can you listen to podcasts? Can you listen to audiobooks? Can you listen to a recorded lecture and absorb the content more than if you're seeing it written down, if you're watching a recording, things like that? Do you learn better by reading? Do you learn better by getting that SOP and sitting there and reading through, 50 pages, and then you feel like you have a good idea of what's going to happen? Are you someone who learns by doing? Do you actually need to have a more involved process in whatever you're learning? Is it something where you need someone to be able to bounce ideas off of and you need to be able to answer questions and stuff like that? A lot of college classes don't look how they used to, and they used to look like someone standing there and lecturing at you. A lot of courses are not like that anymore, especially in graduate school. They're not like that necessarily. There are definitely some who still definitely ascribe to that, and that's how they do things. But a lot of times it is more interactive, and so you have potentially that option to talk more with the facilitator, the professor. So I just want you to think about, what kind of student are you and how do you learn best? You know yourself better than anyone else, so you know what works for you. You might know more what doesn't work for you, which is just as important as knowing what actually works for you. It oftentimes takes longer to get to the point where you can say, this is what I need and this is how I can be successful, whatever that means to you, versus that sucks, I hated that, I never want to do that again. It's a process, and everyone is at different points with it, and it's totally fine if you don't know. It's also totally fine if you learn in different ways based on what you're learning. For me, I would prefer to intellectualize everything and read everything. So when it comes to like my mental health and therapy, I prefer to read about the disorders and read about what I'm experiencing so I can think through it and then have a conversation. I don't work like that with other stuff. With math, I need to be doing it, because you can talk at me all day long. I will completely understand what you're saying while you're doing it, but as soon as I get my homework, I'm like, what are you talking about? None of that works. None of that makes sense. So it's really like a matter of thinking through, the last time that you had the opportunity to learn something, how did that go? What method did the teacher use and did it work for you? A follow-up to that is, okay, what support systems would you like to have that would help you be a successful student? So thinking through, okay, is it going to help me if I'm allowed to record the classes? Is it going to help me if it's an online program where I can rewatch the lectures versus an in-person program where I don't have that option? Is it going to help you to take notes physically? Is it going to help you to take notes online, like digitally? Is it going to help you to have the content in front of you and be following along while the professor is talking? All these things. Is it going to help you to have someone taking notes for you? There's a lot of different accommodations out there, a ton of different things that exist to help students. And so really figuring out what your needs are will ideally make the process easier for everyone, because then you'll be able to say, this is what I need to be successful, and hopefully have someone on your side that can help you arrange that so that you can be successful. The next thing I would recommend, and this is really for people who are going back to school, but this is also for new students, really practice the things that it takes to be a student. So one of the basic things is a routine schedule. There are, you have classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then you have classes Tuesday, Thursday. And a lot of the times the Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes are the 60-minute, 90-minute classes. And then the Tuesday, Thursday are like the labs and the seminars. And you can look at a potential program that you might want to enroll in and, look to see if online anywhere you can find a sample student schedule. If you still have access to one from the last time you went to school, if you know someone in your life that is currently in school, ask them what their schedule is. And then set your schedule that way for the foreseeable future. See if it's something you can continue to stick with. If you are expecting to have a course at 8 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, get up at 6:30, 7 o'clock, 7:45 if you want to roll out of bed, whatever it is, but set that schedule and stick to it. See if it's something that you can do and that you can get your body in the groove of sticking to that schedule. The next recommendation that I have is to practice online courses. So a lot of school is online now, which was not something that existed when I was in school. And if you're going back to school, it's very possible that it didn't exist when you were in school either. Because of things like the pandemic and just the changes in technology and access and all of that, a lot of programs are online. There are also a ton of free online classes that you can take. And this is something I would recommend to anyone. If you have no experience or it's been a really long time since you have been in a formal classroom setting, take an online class for free, find one of the free ones, and make yourself follow the schedule as if it was an in-person formal program class. There will be a syllabus, follow the readings, follow the schedule, give yourself time to do your homework, to do the readings, pretend that there's office hours where you can talk to the professor, sit down and write an essay for the first time in however long. You want to start tricking your brain, like getting your brain to start thinking about the experience of being in school again, because that's often a huge barrier. It's like, not only if you're going back to school, it's not only time and finances, but it's also, I've been out of school for so long, I don't remember how to do it. Get your brain thinking, get your brain practicing ahead of time, and it will make it so much easier once you're actually in school. The next recommendation that I have is, because the internet and social media are so widely available, is to start watching videos from students, making day in my life vlogs, week in my life vlogs as a student are so popular, and there's some of the most watched videos out there in terms of like educational content. So start watching videos from students. Just kind of get yourself back in the mindset of being in school and what that looks like and the requirements day to day, and listen to them talk about the readings they have and the assignments they have and the essays and their struggles and the resources that they use, all of that stuff. Just kind of familiarize yourself with it. This is also something that I do just for fun because I like learning and I like seeing other people's experience with learning. But this is also something that I do to minimize my anxiety when I'm experiencing a new thing. So if I have to go somewhere for an appointment and I've never been there before, I will look for videos that have to do with like that area, so I can get a layout of what campus looks like or what the facility looks like or whatever. I will use Google Street View and walk myself through the campus or walk myself, up and down the streets to see what does it look like. It's just those things of like immersing yourself to eliminate the barrier to entry, which could be anxiety. It's just the not knowing, all of that. So just, you want to get yourself in the mindset of going back to school and what does that look like. So it makes sense that you're going to take in content from people who are experiencing that. Another thing that you can try to do is see if there are any videos from people that have gone to the school that you want to go to, or that are in that program or a comparable one at a different school, and just see what their day-to-day is like. You could decide, I want to go for an archaeology degree, and then you watch the videos from someone in an archaeology program and realize, I changed my mind, that's not at all what I want to do. Sometimes it can reinforce what you want to do, and sometimes it can make you realize like, that is not what I thought it would be. I don't want to do that. Along with watching those videos, what I do and what I recommend that other people do is, if you're watching a video from someone that is in your specific program or in your field of study, start taking notes as they're talking. Write down names of people in the field that they're having to read about. Write down terminology that they use that you're not familiar with, but has something to do with that field. Write down the names of books and journal articles and websites and things like that that they are mentioning, and take your time to do your research on those things. If you want to, you can enter into a program with zero knowledge, and that's totally fine. And a lot of people do that. I did that both times that I went to formal school. It's definitely something that can be done, but it also can help you feel more connected if you already kind of know the words and the people and the topics and that kind of stuff. You don't need to be an expert by any means, but just having like a basic understanding of like, okay, I know that if I have to take an ethics course, we're probably going to learn about this old white guy and this old white guy and this dead white guy. I know if we're going to learn about social work, we're going to learn about this theory and this theory and this theory. If we're going to go psychology, it'll be this. If we go math, it'll be this. You know, things like that that make it a little bit easier on you, and that can also help get your brain thinking about those topics. The next thing that I would recommend is to start practicing using technology. This is so important, especially for older students that are going back to school versus students that are, you know, have been in school this whole time, because you're probably just potentially not used to the technology that they're using in schools. And so a lot of that looks like using the email services that they use. A lot of times schools will just use Outlook or something like that, but also using online, I don't know what they would be called. It's not necessarily an LMS, a learning management system, but I guess it might be, of like Canvas, Blackboard, those kind of things. Those are programs where the teachers will assign you courses and modules in an online format, and so you can follow along through the different modules and stuff. Like that's where you do discussion board questions and all that shit. So just start looking into the technology that's out there. When I was in school, there were no note-taking apps that were really popular, so I took all of my notes by hand, and that sucked. And I went through so much paper and so many pens, and a lot of times you struggle to write down everything before they move on to the next slide or the next topic or whatever. So there are a lot of programs out there to make that process easier, and so those are things like Notion, which is free. There's GoodNote, there's Notability, there's all kinds of apps. I will link some down below that you can just start messing with. A lot of them are free. A lot of them have paid services and paid options. It just kind of depends on what your needs are and what you're looking for. You can also use like Word, WordPad, whatever Mac has, you know, Google Docs, all kinds of stuff. Really just getting yourself familiar with using technology like that will be very helpful for you. But also it's important to recognize if that's not something that's accessible, if it's not the way that you learn, if it's not the way that you take notes. If you prefer to take notes by hand, that's also totally valid and a perfectly fine way that people take notes. I prefer to take notes when I'm working by hand, but when I'm in school, I now prefer to type. So it depends on your preference and your access and things like that. The other technology piece is so much of the reading and learning process is going to be reading and learning from a screen. And there are definitely ways that, you know, you can get around that. If you have access to a printer, you can print off a lot of the stuff and, you know, read it that way. It all depends on your needs, but kind of in general, if it's something that makes sense for you, it's something that you have access to, all of that stuff, try to get used to reading from a screen. If you've been working, you probably read from a screen. If you have a smartphone, you read from a screen all the time. But when it comes to like journal articles, textbooks, that kind of stuff, that's kind of a different process of reading from a screen. And that's something that I struggle with because, like I said, when I was in school, even grad school, I printed out everything. And so now going back to school, I've had to kind of teach myself how to read from a screen while also taking notes, because my inclination is to print out everything and write all over it. And that doesn't make sense for a lot of people. That's expensive as balls, you know. It's like, it's not necessarily the best process. What my husband and I ended up doing in grad school was we got an office printer, like an industrial printer. We've had this thing for so long. It only prints in black and white, but it made printing so much cheaper than getting like a typical printer that you'd go pick up at Walmart. Ours is a Brother printer. I will try to find the same one or a similar one and link it down below. That's an option if you are going to have to print out a lot of stuff, because your school might give you a certain amount of money for printing services as part of your tuition and all of that. But if you're like me, you're going to go through that so fast, so it makes more sense to have an alternative. One of the alternatives being reading online, like reading from a screen. There are textbooks that you can get, and you can read them as ebooks. I would say to practice reading textbooks or denser material from a screen. There are different ebook readers, so you can get books that you can read on Kindle, you know, through your library, all kinds of stuff. So that's just like stuff to practice. And as much as I can, I will link resources down below. Here's a couple fun ones, I think, anyway. So this is what I do when I want to be learning about something new and I don't necessarily want to spend all that money. One thing is textbooks are ridiculously expensive. so unbelievably expensive. That's often one of the biggest shockers to people when they go to school and they think like, oh, I have tuition and all that covered. Not textbooks. They're so expensive, and it's stupid. It's so stupid. I'm just gonna say it's stupid how expensive they are. A lot of what professors do, this is my experience in undergrad and grad school, is that if a textbook is required, a lot of the times the professors will say, okay, we're going to be reading from this textbook. However, there's a new edition, which is really expensive. You can get the previous edition to save some money. So that's something I would ask. If you're given an assigned list of textbooks, is to ask, is it a requirement that I read from the current newest edition, or can I get a previous edition to save some money? There are programs out there that let you rent textbooks. You can do it through Chegg or Amazon. There's probably other ones at this point. You can buy textbooks used. Another recommendation that I have is if you live near a college town or you have the ability to drive to a college town, find a thrift store that's in that college town or close to it. And in the springtime, go check out the thrift store and their book section if they have one, because that is when I find the most interesting books at the thrift store, is during the final days of a semester when students are like, I hate this, and like they donate all of their books. That's how I get textbooks. So when I'm watching, people that are doing English degrees, which I'm not doing an English degree, I don't have one, but I love reading and I want to learn about that. Well, this is one of the textbooks that one of the students that I was watching had. And then I went to the thrift store and I found a copy for $1.99. This is definitely something that probably doesn't exist for a lot of people, but I would say go to local, if you have the ability to, go to thrift stores, go to used bookstores in the area where there are schools like universities and colleges and stuff, and see what they have. A lot of times just typical thrift stores, not anywhere near a school, will also get textbooks. So that's also something you can do to like test out whether or not this is something you want to continue with, like going to school, is get textbooks, get old textbooks and just read through them, like skim them, try reading a whole chapter, things like that. You don't necessarily need to go buy anything new because they're hundreds and hundreds of dollars. But if you can find a used one, if you know someone in your life that has their textbooks from school, just like expose yourself to what academic writing looks like in different fields, and that'll be very helpful. The next thing this is something that I didn't know existed, but it's something that I've been doing, is looking up old syllabi from courses that might make their information public. So there are a bunch of online resources that do have all of their stuff public. So I will link all of that down below, but oftentimes what you need to do, and this is even what I did with the current course that I'm taking, copy and paste the specific name of the course, put that into your search engine and see what you get. Oftentimes you can find other versions of that same course concept that were taught by different universities, and if those courses are old enough, you might find access to an old syllabus. And then that can give you an example of what the layout of that course could look like. And oftentimes they will have the names in there of like specific readings or specific theories and stuff. And then that's a jumping off point for you to learn more. But also say to utilize the library system in your community if you have one. There are also some libraries out there that you don't need a current address in that community in order to get a library card. So if that's available to you, I would recommend using your library system. Speak to your librarian, to the people working at the service desk, and ask them if they have access to academic journals or if they have access to textbooks, things like that. See what resources your library has to offer you. And following along with that, and my final recommendation is to practice getting access to journals, because journal articles are a huge part of further education, of higher education, and you're probably going to have to read some at some point depending on your program. So it's something you want to get used to doing. They will hopefully teach you along the way how to do this, but it's also something that you can do in the meantime to see what's the new stuff happening in the field that I'm interested in, or what is like the foundational knowledge of that field, things that everyone should know. So the thing that I use the most is Google Scholar, and there are probably other ones out there to get you access to journal articles, but it's just another huge piece of higher education that I think is so important that people get access to early on and then have help with along the way, because they're not super easy to read or navigate until you're taught how and you're using them for a specific purpose. I think this is enough. I think I got my point across. There's tons of stuff I didn't answer. I did not go into the financial parts of going back to school at all, because it's been so long since I've done it, and the system in the United States is a little bit chaotic right now, so I don't actually know what any of that looks like. I'm not going to offer myself up to answer questions about financial aid and stuff like that, because I have no idea. I really don't. I have no knowledge on that. I only know what it was like for me 10 years ago. But if there are other questions that you have, if you're thinking about going into a certain field, if you have a field identified and you don't know what to do next, any questions that you have, please feel free to ask me, and I will try my best to assist you any way that I can. If there's a question that I didn't answer that you think would be good for like a future video, definitely let me know. Yeah, I just want this to continue to have I want people to continue to have conversations about higher education and about learning, no matter what that looks like for you. It doesn't have to be a formal program. It could be just something you're doing for funsies, and just ask me questions, like help me learn, help other people learn. I will help you however I can. If you've stuck with me this whole time, I really appreciate you, and I hope y'all are doing well, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.